more people coming in.
Oh, we have more people coming. All right, so we'll just that first act, or we could start this way, and then when they come in, they can introduce themselves. So I'm Courtney. Most of you know me. I am Pastor Preston's wife, and I have a passion and a love for world religion. It's like probably one of my favorite things to study is the religiosity of people, just in general. So I'm super excited to be here to facilitate some really excellent conversation.
Oh, okay. Well, do me. Well, hey, I'm Pastor Preston. Nice to meet you. So it's really great that we have an opportunity to have somebody with such a passion, but also has the knowledge, because Hamilton does a really nice job of kind of hitting the basics, but also doing it in a way that I don't think really diminishes anything. But looking at the slides Courtney prepared, I think we're going to have something really added today.
Hi, I'm Dawn. I'm a longtime member of Grace Church, and hi. I'm Sandy. Sandy John. Excuse me. And I've been a member here for 16 years.
I'm Bob, Sandy's husband, and I've been here just like she's been here, and I'm anxious to learn about the world's religions. That's why I'm here.
Hi, I'm Joe McDonald. I won't say how long I've been here. And I just like to learn.
I'm Jim. I was a member here for a very long for a number of reasons, and I came back last January, and the way the church is going and under the direction of Pastor Preston and Courtney. I'm excited to be here.
Hi, I'm Linda Thomas.
Hi.
I've been back in Ohio for 8 years now, and I'm still getting my roots.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
And I'm Bill, and I started here when all we had was folding chairs, 1971. I came to Vermillion, and I just never found my way anyplace else.
I'm Joanne. I belong with that guy over there. And anyway, he won't tell you, but we have been here for 55 years. So
Wow.
this is home.
I'm Diane Ertzik, and we retired here by the lake. For the first time I walked in the door, the first time I met people around me, it was a done deal. Alex, friend of Courtney, and Courtney and Preston, and others below around, and we're visiting from just north of DC.
Welcome. DC.
Time to get out of there.
I'm Alex. I'm Alex's husband. I'm from the same place.
Dorothy, and I'm their friend, and I'm also from the same place. I'm Courtney and Preston's friend as well.
I'm Sharon, and I work in the sensory room. And I was really disillusioned by a lot of churches, and my hope is back. My feeling of community and such nice people is back, and I love it here. I love it here.
Donuts have no.
Normally we have coffee donuts set up in here. The coffee donuts is set up in the fellowship hall today. I was trying to mitigate some of the moving around. Joan, would you like to introduce yourself, or would you like to stay anonymous?
Anonymous.
Okay.
No, that was a question. I'll do it quickly. Yeah, it's nice to have this Zoom option and today. So yeah, I came to Vermillion when I was appointed as pastor in 2005, and I retired from Grace in 2013. Grace being the last church that I served in my ministry, and Roger and I are both retired clergy, and just so happily settled in this community of Grace. So
We're so excited.
What? Okay.
You can join us this way. It's so fun. I don't know if they can hear me.
You speak it not into the computer, speak it to the
Oh, okay, well, that's gonna be weird. And then this is lovely young lady next to me.
Hello, my name's Rachel. I've been coming here since 2003 and enjoying this class with my mom, but she did not make it today. So, and last week we didn't make it. So far, we're not doing very well.
Okay.
But you're here now.
Um, So, yeah, we've got like, so this week is. So. But I'm supposed to take notes and give her the update.
Okay. Well, she can also, we're recording it, so. Are you okay with it being recorded?
Yeah, she won't watch it.
Worth a try.
Or,
Um,
I mean, if it's on YouTube or something, I don't know. If it's I can't.
We'll figure it out. We're doing something new. It's a new thing that we're doing, and it's gonna be the new thing that we're doing. So.
Some info about sales.
You know what, Siri? I'm gonna ask you all to take a moment just to center yourselves. And just like last time, I will start with the song bowl. And us then into a moment of prayer before we dive on in. Almighty God, you are the most creative force in the universe. Thank you for the way that you show up in the leaves and in the trees and in the flowers and in the bees. Thank you for the way that you inspire us to you in deepening our relationship. Thank you for giving us creativity. Thank you for giving us curiosity. Thank you for bringing us together to ask questions, to learn how to be better neighbors and better siblings as we are all along this journey we call life. Be with us today as we explore and go deeper into understanding our neighbors and into understanding who it is that you truly call us to be. May we be open to what you might plant and grow and harvest in us. Amen. Okay. Step one, we're gonna walk this though. Where we got a
Wrong place.
Yeah, if there's anyone, if I can adjust the volume in any way, please just let me know.
Next to me. Should we move the phone for Joe?
You can't show the video for
Oh.
copyright.
I'd like to really focus our attention on what Hindus believe and then how Christianity might line up, the common places and then the places where we might disagree. And to do that, I thought it'd be good to actually hear from a Hindu himself. And so we went to the Hindu temple last week on Lackman Road in Shawnee. And I had a chance to speak to Debabrata Baduri, Dr. Debabrata Baduri. He is a nuclear physicist who devoted his life to the field of oncology and spent most of his career working at KU Medical Center. And then in retirement, he went to the VA hospital and he worked several days a week there. He's one of our neighbors who lives just south of the church. And many of you might know his children, his family, his wife. A really great guy. And I had a chance to sit down with him and I said, can you summarize for me briefly what Hindus believe? And this is what he said.
Central piece of Hindu belief is that there is a almighty, supreme God. The supreme God, which we call Brahman, and that's the source of the deities. There are many deities. Deities are manifestation of that supreme God, a certain aspect of God. We believe that, as I said, that every person has a soul. We call the self. The soul takes birth and takes the body and lives in this life. And then when this life ends, the body is destroyed, but the soul does not get destroyed. It transmigrates to another life. Maybe another person is born, or maybe another, and soul goes to there and then again creates another life. So in this way, the soul is everlasting. During that time, the work, the karma means the way you work or behave in the world, it actually determines your fate in the next life. And so in the past, people who have done good karma will be born in a better condition, better life. This way, Hindus believe that the life is always evolving in that sense, that the soul, by doing more and more good actions, but our main goal is to pray to God or connect to God, and then do my duties for the family, for the society, for the nation. All these things are prescribed in the Hindu guidelines. And by doing all these things, I try to soul more and more and get peace.
So I want to recap those and unpack them just a little bit, some of these key centralist beliefs of the Hindu people. And by the way, I'll mention that Hindus are not all of one mind in terms of how they talk about their faith or what they believe, in the same way that Christians are not. So if you were to go interview a Russian Orthodox priest in Moscow and ask him to describe Christianity, and then you were to go to a Pentecostal pastor in Alabama, you would probably hear two very different ways of describing the Christian faith. The same is true with Hinduism. So I'm going to capture sort of the essentials as I understand them. So the first is that Hindus believe in one God, one supreme being, typically referred to as Brahman. And this is confusing. Christians go to a Hindu temple find that there are, as he described them, deities or divinities, these idols or images of various gods. And so you say, well, wait a minute, I thought they were polytheistic. But the Hindu will quickly explain to you that all of those are only manifestations of the one supreme being. There is just one God, and that God created everything, and everything is in God, and in a sense, everything is God. So Hinduism is a pantheistic or panentheistic faith. That is that everything is a part of God. And at the same time, God is even bigger than everything that exists. So even your soul is a part of God. Everything that exists is a part of God. And at the same time, God is beyond that. God is transcendent, and God is supra-personal. That is, God is personality. So Hindus don't envision God as a personal being that you would have conversations with in the same way that we envision God. The second thing I'd mention is that every human being, every creature has a soul, an Atman. It's called the Atman, and this soul begins its journey on earth as and just to remember that soul is a part of God. Its journey is to return to God and be reunited with God, and it's cloaked in as it develops ego. And so the soul begins its journey on earth in a very primitive form. So this may be in the form of an animal. Actually, it's always in the form of an animal or perhaps a plant. And if duty is the word in Hinduism. If it fulfills its duty well, it does whatever an insect is to do or an animal is to do, then it has a chance to be reincarnated as a higher life form. So it's this long journey of death and rebirth as another life form. If you've done well with your dharma, if you've fulfilled your duty, then you return as a higher life form and you have a chance to advance in the evolution of your soul on your journey towards being reunited to God. Now, if you don't do your duty, you don't do what you were supposed to do, then you actually go backwards a step or two, and you continue to learn, and then hopefully you've learned the lessons you need to learn, and then you have done the things you need to do, and you're able to be reborn as a higher form of life. And into your next life, that's called karma. And so you carry with you a good energy if you did well, and if you didn't do so well, you carry with you a bad karma, which leads you backwards in that evolutionary development of your soul. The cycle of life and death and rebirth over and over and over again is called samsara, and samsara is often translated as suffering. And so you are stuck in this cycle, endless cycle, or nearly endless cycle of suffering until you've learned what you need to learn, you've progressed far enough, and then perhaps after hundreds or maybe thousands of lifetimes, you finally achieve moksha. And moksha is shed the ego. You have let go of all of your clinging, and you're finally allowed in that last incarnation, you are finally allowed to be reunited to God at your death. And this is sometimes described, your soul is described as a drop of water reunited with the ocean. And so now you become absorbed into God. But there's one last idea that's important in Hinduism, and that is the idea of ahimsa. And ahimsa is non-injury. And so within Hinduism, the idea is that you're not to injure other living things. You're not to injure yourself or other living things. And so that means while you might eat vegetables, for many Hindus, they practice vegetarianism. They don't kill animals. Lower forms of life are okay to eat, and so maybe fish or chicken, but nothing much above that. So there's this idea that we're not going to injure the animals, but we don't injure one another. And so for some Hindus, they are pacifist. For some Hindus, they believe in just war, but only when it's necessary in order to protect the life of an innocent. And so there's an emphasis on ahimsa. Mahatma Gandhi was an example of this idea lived out. Gandhi was certainly the best known Hindu in our lifetime. Actually, died before I was born, but in the last century, died in 1948. And he practiced this idea of non-injury and said it had the power to revolutionize his India. And so he overthrew the British, who were the colonial power in India, by the practice of nonviolent resistance, which was ahimsa. It was non-injury, and then resisting the control of the British. All right, I want to point to a few connections between Hinduism and Christianity, and then we'll look at some of the differences. The first is that we both believe in one supreme God, transcendent, glorious, all-powerful, all-consuming God. The second is this idea that God meets humans through incarnations. So even in the Old Testament, God occasionally appears as a human, but for Christians, of course, the supreme incarnation is Jesus. But when Jesus comes, he's God enfleshed, the Word becomes flesh. He's born as an infant. He lives a life, 33 years. He suffers and dies. And the whole point of Jesus coming was to reveal who God is and what God's will is for our lives. And so while we see those incarnations differently, we both share an idea that God sometimes comes in this way. The third is that we share a belief that humans were made for kindness, compassion, love, and good deeds. And so your Hindu friends, they take this very seriously. Their future life depends on the good deeds that they practice towards you and towards other people. And then finally, the respect for life, which is captured in injury, and the capacity to love one's enemies, which is found both in Christianity and in Hinduism. Now, there are many other points of connection, but those are the key points. I want to mention some of the points of divergence. When it comes to God, while I see some parallels there between our understandings of God, especially when Moses is speaking to God and he says, "What's your name?" And God says, "My name is I am that I am. I am life itself. I am existence itself. Everything is contingent upon me." That's a similar kind of idea. And when Paul says to the Athenians, "In him we live and move and have our being," quoting the Greek poet Epimenides, he's capturing an idea that's also parallel in Hinduism. In the supreme being we live and the two. In Hinduism, as near as I can tell, God is conceived as a very impersonal God, although manifested in more personal ways. Whereas in the Bible, God is a very personal being. So from the very beginning, God creates human beings to be recipients of God's love. And throughout the scriptures, we find God is referred to in very personal ways, deeply personal and intimate ways. When we come to Jesus, when Jesus talks about God, he routinely describes God as his heavenly Father. Well, the second place where I think there's some disconnect is with regard to the idea of salvation and what happens to us at our death, and really what we need to be saved from. And so within Hinduism, we understand the idea is that you are developing, subsumed back into God, and you're on this journey, and in that journey, what you need is not saving from sin, but you need spiritual knowledge to help you progress. So the Hindu is searching for spiritual knowledge found through meditation and finding a spiritual master and reading the scriptures. Now, we all are looking for spiritual knowledge. We do the same. We read scripture, we come and we pray, we listen, we come to church. All of that's about growing in our spiritual lives. But in the Hindu conception, we need that spiritual knowledge, which then allows us to perform good works. And those good works allow us to reach or attain a higher life the next time we come around when we're reborn. And so that's a different idea of the journey than what be saved from and what really the story of our planet and our lives are. For Christians, we look at it and say, this is a result of sin. It's our brokenness as human beings. And what we need is to be saved from ourselves. We need forgiveness and grace. And then we need a changed heart. We need a new heart to be changed. And we can't do that by ourselves. And so for the Hindu, while the idea is if I do good works, I can elevate myself to the next status, Christians say you can't do enough good works to save yourself. You need saving. You need God to redeem you and to save you and to offer you grace and mercy that you don't deserve. You don't get what you deserve in Christianity. And you do get what you don't deserve in Christianity. And so that idea is called grace. And then we believe life, we stand before God and that's it. We don't get another one or 100 more or 1,000 more. It's just this one. And at the end of this life, what we're offered is the opportunity to be with God in God's eternal kingdom. So that's the Christian conception of what's going on. And when I think about that, I think about the hope I have. First, to be able to connect with God personally and intimately, as we try to do in our own Christian spiritual journey. The second is that I know that I cannot do enough good works to win my way to heaven, but instead God offers this as a gift. And then in response to that, in response to God's good gift, I seek to do good work and good works. So here's what I want to challenge. Kind of people who understand your own faith well enough to have a real dialogue with other people about it. I want you to not be threatened by other people's faith, but instead to listen with compassion and kindness and empathy. To be the kind of people who, in listening to someone talk about their faith, can find common ground and at the same time can find certain place where you say, well, that's why I appreciate my faith. That's my hope for us. Empathetic, compassionate, concerned, and recognizing the good in others, and in the process of dialoguing, growing in our faith while demonstrating love for our neighbor.
Okay. Who might be new, where did everything go?
Where did everything go?
Yeah, I
The
don't,
question you're asking me. You're referring to why can't you see your slides?
or any of the,
Any of the,
like the bottom thing, like your little like bouncy
Okay.
icon thing is not there.
because it's on the side. First of
Oh,
So here's what we're gonna do. All right, we're gonna move to share our screen.
uh-huh.
Yep.
I swear I know what I'm doing. For those of you who are new, or who have not been with us the whole time, you're probably like, who is this Adam Hamilton guy and why are we listening to him? Adam Hamilton is a United Methodist pastor in Kansas City.
Kansas City.
And he's the pastor of like the biggest United Methodist church like in the world. He's also a prolific author. He wrote the Making Sense of the Bible book that we just finished before this study. He's written good at making things accessible. Are you trying to figure out how to make the slideshow happen?
Yeah, that is.
Okay.
Or you could let me do that.
Okay. Sure.
Yeah. We'll get there.
And so he has created a number of studies on everything from religion and science to different world religions. And the United Methodist Church has sort of like rubber stamped all of his stuff because he's pretty accessible for a lot of people. He's like a dude, like he's just a guy. And that makes him more relatable. And that's why we use Hamilton stuff. It's pretty easy to follow. It's pretty concise. He's not super heady. And that makes him a pretty great place to start. So before we dive headlong into discussion, there's a few things that I would also like to offer that the video doesn't necessarily cover the way that perhaps I would have liked. So I want you to kind of think about your preconceptions of Hinduism before you got here today. Did you have any? It's okay if the answer's no.
Well, it seems like I totally misunderstood karma. I'm
Most
blaming
people
social media for that.
Yeah. So most people do.
Valid.
Because it's my understanding through social media. No, is that karma, Bill did me wrong, and then he gets a flat tire on the way home, that's karma. Bad example, but whatever. Oh, don't smile. But I didn't realize it was until another life form. And also, what's the highest?
Nirvana. We'll get to that.
Okay. How
So-
far are we?
Did anyone else have?
Joanne and I have both traveled through India and have seen Hinduism firsthand. And I have a lot of questions about it, having seen what I saw in India. And I really can't get my arms around it yet.
I'm gonna see if I can make that a little easier.
I think so first I want to apologize. I listen a lot better when my hands are busy, so I hope I'm not being rude.
We also have
admiring
fidgets and
you.
sensory toys if anybody needs
Yeah.
them.
But I guess even though I have had a couple Hindu friends in my life, I've always kind of thought more polytheistic. Like I thought that the different Vishnu, the different deities, I always had the impression that those were gods.
No.
And understanding that they're more like manifestations or little bits, or like I'm a recovering Catholic, so we have a lot of like patron saints. So now I'm thinking like
Similar.
oh, there's some kind of parallel there. If you're thinking about, fertility, you might be thinking about this saint for this
Ganesha.
deity. And that clicks a little bit more in my brain, and I think I got a fuller understanding just from that.
I didn't know. So
Anybody?
I was thinking about that and like the gods and like Venus and Joette and so.
Those things kind of came, so in the book he talks about how time frame, right? So like if you look at a map of the world, where the Greco-Roman world is developing and then South Asia is developing, there are a lot of parallels and a lot of exchange of human existence that occurred that probably very likely informed the way these different religions kind of evolved, and then also smooshed in Southeast Asia with the religions that predate any concept of what we might call like a Vedic religion. But the people who held the Vedic poetry and chants and stories before they were written down then kind of blended with some of those Greco-Roman to Hinduism as we're starting to understand it now. Although it has changed a lot over 5,000 years, so nothing's the same.
For me, I've been a few places. I have been exposed to all of these religions in their homes. And for me, and that's why I'd love to chat with Mr. McDonald about things that are more confusing. Obviously, and you guys, and I read your travel log also on the trip, and there is no place I mean, you can go to South America, Central America, any place, but I think India is more poor. However, of all of the places I have been, I found their devotion, their purity about their belief in God to be above any other culture I have ever experienced. They don't have distractions. They don't have cell phones. They don't have TVs. They barely have food. They don't have shelter. And yet every day they can marigolds for a lei or a coconut to offer to God. And it's not like it's something like you go to church or you hear something where it's Christmas and it touches you. This is a daily living, breathing faith for them. And there's a purity of spirit I have never experienced. Never. Israel, anywhere.
And like for me, thinking about it in this conception, the eminence of Christianity compared to the patience of Hinduism, sort of like, you know, it's one thing, like we have one lifetime to get it right.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of conversation that we had in our previous study about like what we truly believe about grace and what we understand is biblical and stuff like that. But I think that there is an eminence in our culture, in the Western world, not just in Christianity, that does not really exist. It might indicate something different, because it's very busy everywhere you go. However, I think there's a patience with oneself that we lack, and maybe we could learn from. So I want to go over some basic vocabulary that is helpful for understanding broad strokes. We're still doing very broad strokes because, like he said in the first video, each one of these religions is just as nuanced and complex as Christianity. And you know, we could spend literally years talking about the differences between different branches of Christianity. The same could be said for members of any faith are identical in what they believe and claim and experience. Why? Because we all see the world through our own eyeballs. So Vedas are sacred scriptures. Vedas, or the Vedic poems, as you'll sometimes hear them referred to, were orally transmitted for, we're not really sure how long, but like a really, really long time. And then circa 3000 to 2000 BC, they started to write them down. Why did they start to write them down? Why did we write the Old Testament, right? Like we had this oral tradition in the Israeli culture, that then became a written tradition. So and they like to have a sense of who they are as people. The Upanishads are commentaries or the writings, ruminatings, meditations of wizened religious leaders on the Vedic poems. It's a lot like Talmud. We haven't gotten to Judaism yet. We're going to talk about Mishnah Torah and Talmud. And if he doesn't talk about it, I'm going to make sure we talk about it. But like it's a very similar kind of concept of like the wisdom of generations gets passed down by writing commentaries. Bob and Sandy are amazing and brought their Bhagavad Gita. Like if we imagined the Bible as like this book is the story of Abraham and Sarah, and this book is the story of Moses, and this book, like if we kind of conceptualized it that way, and each one was like an epic, that's kind of what the epic Vedic stories are. So the Bhagavad Gita is the most well known, and it is the story of Arjuna and Krishna, and there's a war, there's war with self, there's claiming one's destiny. It's a really compelling story. I asked their permission, so I am going to pass this around just so you can look at it. It does have the Sanskrit and then like in English, but like
Interpretation.
the alliteration. Thank you. That thing underneath each passage and then the English. So I'm going to pass this around. This is beautiful artwork. I love it. I have no idea where my copy of the Bhagavad Gita is, and I was very upset about that. So I was thrilled that they brought theirs.
Whose book is this?
Bob and Sandy.
Oh, thank you.
So the Bhagavad Gita is the most well-known Hindu scripture epic. Krishna is the manifestation of God in the Bhagavad Gita. Arjuna is the prince. Arjuna is a very common representation in Hindu culture and in Indian culture. He's a part of their pop culture. So it's an important kind of thing to be aware of. So the Atman is your soul. It is the part of your soul or your existence that is divine. You'll hear people do namaste. That literally means I bow to the divine, and the divine in me bows to the divine in you. That wasn't really mentioned, but because a lot of people are like, oh, namaste, I figured we should talk about what that means.
Yeah.
Say that again.
So namaste, like,
Namaste.
it depends on where you're from, and like me. So my Atman bows to the divine within you. Um,
Basically what I said.
so it's so all creatures possess the Atman, all animals, all beings. There is a hierarchy based on karma and dharma. So your dharma is your duty to fulfill God's will for your life, whatever that is. If you are a cat, it is your dharma to kill all the mice. And if you do that, you are a good cat and maybe will attain good karma and be reincarnated as a higher form. Because like if I get reincarnated, I would like to be a house cat. So, and I don't mean that to make light of their beliefs. Like genuinely, if that's the reality, I want to be a
It's a
cat.
good life.
And so our karma is the energy we create by deeds, either good karma or bad karma. Samsara is the cycle of death and rebirth. Now, you can start as a fly, so your life is very short, and you can end up a tortoise, and your life would be very long. And so, this idea of samsara is very wavering and kind of ebbs and flows with the movement of the universe. Is the release from the reincarnation cycle. So, moksha is when you have gotten to that place of being fully evolved and knowable as a soul. Your soul is ready to be reunified with the divine. So nirvana is that reunion with God. Now, nirvana is going to show up in Buddhism as well. So like hold some, that's why I'm spending time on this, because it's going to show up in Buddhism later on as well. And then ahisma is the idea of non-injury. So in United Methodist Church, we have the 3 simple rules. And so I think that like it is a simple kind of parallel there. Non-injury to all I just went over, but the panentheist view of God in that God is in the trees, God is in the bushes, God is in the rocks, God is in the mountains. God is the mountains. Everything around us is God, is holy, is sacred, as opposed to more the Christian perspective where God created these things and they might point to or reflect God, but is the reflection in the mirror you? No. And so that's they don't have truly a sense of sin in the way that Christians believe that sin is the corruption of our soul or the separation of us from God. Sin or bad karma, I guess, is losing sight of one's soul, one's purpose, or one's dharma. So when you become, yeah, in many ways separated from the true essence of who we are called to be, but the mechanism of that is different. God reveals God aspects of God's self through manifestations, aspects of Brahman in the deities. So Brahman is Yahweh, for lack of a better parallel. Cycle, Brahman is the supreme God. It's not quite as simple as Adam Hamilton gets to, but I wanted to show you some of the artwork because one of the biggest things you're going to see when you get to a Hindu temple, should you ever go, is you're going to see these beautiful, elaborate, usually like covered in jewels and gold and all kinds of things all over the deities themselves. So I wanted to kind of give you a sense of what it looks like to look at a manifestation of Brahman. So Lord Krishna from the Bhagavad Gita, this is Lord Krishna. Almost always gotta let and then there's also a Trinity in Hinduism, but it's different from our Trinity. So Brahman is the like center of this triune God. They call it a Trimurti or Trimurti. I can do it, I promise. So Brahman's kind of the center, and then on the other side you have Shiva and Vishnu. So Brahman is the creator, Vishnu is the protector, and Shiva is the destroyer, the one who brings forth death, because death is still very much a part of the cycle of creation, and that and so that is how they conceptualize this idea of three. It's more like modalism, and like if you were to commit a Christian heresy and conceptualize our Trinity as like pieces of God or Jesus and the Holy Spirit, but they're not of the same essence. The Christian Trinity is confusing and weird. I'm not even gonna try because I don't really get it either. But their Trinity is way less complicated. It's just like it's not really three in one, it's just there are three. Ganesha is like my favorite and the god of prosperity. Ganesha is also a manifestation of the oneness between body and soul. So there's a lot of different stories about how one tusk got broken because he threw it at the moon for taunting him. He was beheaded when he got in between his father and his mother, and his dad like lost his mind and then was like, "Oh my God, I killed my son!" and then sewed an elephant head onto him. But it is the manifestation of the soul. So the elephant head represents the soul, and then his body represents human experience. And so he is sort of the soul, which is often why he has a different symbol on his third eye. The bindi and any of the symbols you'll see on the gods' foreheads are indications of the third eye that is to become awakened on a spiritual level, not just with your physical eyes. And so Ganesha often has an Om because he is that kind of union of those things, but also like he's just so pretty. Like I love the lotus flowers. The lotus flower is a significant symbol because the lotus grows in the mud after the flood and destruction of the rainy season. Our own storms and floods of life, remember that the lotus blooms. Things that we talk about in Western culture a lot that I think get misunderstood that I just wanted to like run over. Om. The symbol at the bottom is an Om. You've probably seen it on yoga pants or on random posters or just about anything that a white girl who does yoga owns. I say this as a white girl who does yoga. What does Om mean? Where does it come from? So the symbol for Om is used all over Southeast Asia, Asia, the Middle East. So if you've ever seen the tattoo on my forearm, I have a hamsa. It is the hand with the evil eye. It is a protection. It is a symbol that is cultural, that has been appropriated by different religions. So just like the Om, many different religions have appropriated the visual representation of Om, which is depicted there. Om is the sound of the cosmos. So the idea of Om is to bring forth vibration into your chest and into your spirit to become in union with the vibration of the universe. Pre-Vedic writing down the chants matched perfectly with the vibrations of the periodic table, which I thought was like mind blowing and super cool when I was in college. It's a similar kind of idea, that this idea of the current or the vibration of energy through the universe, it's very like meta science. Roll with me here. We're calling that forth, but joining in. So it allows us to then open that third eye and join with the cosmos and move beyond ourselves in meditation and in work. Yoga is than just like moving your body on a mat. Yoga is the idea of everything you do to achieve moksha, including your dharma, including your karma, including all of these things becomes your yoga, which is your practice or your living. But there is unity involved in body, mind, and spirit in Hinduism that I personally think is really beautiful, and very central to their belief is that, yes, my soul is divine, but it is in this body and it is this life that I will use to get to the next one. And so when you unify those things, it becomes much more powerful and much more aligned. And so it's a way to begin to merge and control and understand the merging of our body, mind, and soul as opposed to the separation of body, mind, and soul, which Paul sometimes calls us to, because he's like, your body don't matter. And like Hinduism is like, actually, so that's another one of our differences. I've been rambling a lot, so now it's time for me to shut up. So I have some discussion questions on here. If you guys want, we can go through them. If you have questions, I can try to answer them. I think, what do you guys want to do? What do you see as the areas of common ground between Christians and Hinduism? That was a poorly worded question. I'm sorry.
One God.
Hmm?
One God.
One God. Yep.
Kindness.
Do no
Not
harm
harming
and
others.
kindness. Yeah. Absolutely.
It hasn't shown up, but in all 12 of the major religions is the golden rule.
Yes.
Is what?
The golden rule in some capacity. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Or love your neighbor as yourself. There's others is another way that it's often phrased.
I see the purity as Sharon spoke about in my daughter-in-law. I see that because she doesn't go to temple, but she embraces her religion daily. She's very aware of her karma, and I think to the point where she does too much for others in her house. Yeah, but she works very hard at it, and kindness, compassion, and love. Those are all very important to Christians as well as Hindus, as well as every other religion. But I see that purity.
Yeah. The year that I was there, now this is a country now with 2 billion people. Imagine how crowded we think we are here with 330 million. It hit 1 billion when I was there. That has doubled. Yeah. The year prior to my visit, now this number is, think of the violent nature of our culture. The year before I visited, in the entire country, and I'm going to use the word only, although only is huge in this, but there were only 7 rapes.
Wow.
In
That
a
were
country of,
reported.
huh?
That were reported.
Yeah, sure, but what goes unreported here, hers. So that is, it's not normal. Be violent against each other. It really isn't, and makes it really a beautiful, and they're on top of each other everywhere. So it's a beautiful culture. Beautiful.
What areas of difference do you feel call you or challenge you to grow deeper or do more in your own day-to-day walk with God?
That one more time.
What areas of difference? So like what about Hinduism might inspire or call you to grow deeper in your walk with God? Yeah, so like I'll give you an example because I guess I'm not wording that well. The relationship between nonviolence and diet. So like I have been a vegan and a vegetarian on and off throughout my life because I have struggled with the concept of harming animals. And like going back through Hinduism, I was like, man, I've been eating meat a lot. Like I'm having some feelings about myself because I do feel a kinship with creation that I don't know that I'm necessarily living into. And I got to figure out what feels more authentic to me at this. Then when I was 9, animal products. So those are that is something that I feel called to wrestle with by studying and reviewing Hinduism, because the way they live into that on a daily level is calling me to do more with my own life. So is there anything for you guys that's showing up that you're like, huh, maybe I should do this better or more often?
They honor the earth much more than, they do. And they're very, you mentioned marigolds, those are really very special.
Everywhere.
Thing, they use every part, I'm seeing this in my daughter-in-law's family. They don't waste any part of the celery or the, or any plant. And they do a lot of planting, and plants are a way that they honor their deities. With the garlands and flowers and all just and everything plays. So I think they do a better job with the earth. They have a different snap though on animals. First, as we eat beef and pork and chicken, but the true pure Indians don't eat any meat. Eggs, but no meat. We're off.
Yeah. I think they said something about mind, body, and soul. So I don't know if my mom remembers this, but when I was little, I engraved it.
Cool.
I engraved mind, body, and soul because and I was probably, I don't even know if I spelled them right, but that's but that's all. I think that's always been. Anyway, that's always been a struggle for me. Like, that's something I think I've always tried to do, and I'll be like, okay, I'm doing this, I'm doing it. Like something falls. So that's, and then you're talking about the self-automation and we have, and I'm not really concentrating on what I want to be a lot of the time. So it's a challenge for me. I'm gonna put it that way. I know you think I got a challenge.
Throw in something that really, you'll say, good heavens, doesn't this guy have anything better to offer than this? But when I was camping in Wyoming, I ran across a group of professors of animal science, University of Minnesota, University of Arizona, and so on. And the animal that they were all interested in was beef. Really, that's it. Artificial insemination, breeding, this and that, and so on. And it's always puzzled me how the cow attained such prominence in the Hindu culture. Does anybody have any information? I have none. I haven't tried to find out either. I just kind of story from these guys. They were all PhDs, heads of departments, and it was an interesting group. But what would, does anybody have any idea? Have you heard anything about how the cow rose to such prominence? And I'll tell you a story that'll make you shake your head.
Why don't you tell the story?
Okay. One of the fellows, really nice young man, was recruited to go to India to help them with the he would be at a home and a cow would come walking along and just walk right in the front door, poop on the couple times on the way through the house, go to the nice garden at the back of the house and start eating all the stuff that they were raising and just move on. And they just had too many cows, creating a problem. And his solution was to do vasectomies.
That is a solid way to
I mean,
mitigate population.
and he was.
I like that he
and
chose
did
those.
that. What he was doing, and he was invited to leave.
Well,
But then he was recruited by a different part, other folks in India, and he went back to do the same sort of thing. And I'm wondering, well, the people who would hire him to do a vasectomy on the cows to keep the population under control, what is their thought process? And how do they justify that? I don't know that that's doing any harm to the. But
Let's try it on you and see what you feel afterwards.
you know,
Not gonna
that is-
stop it.
Dorothy, what's up?
You are so predictable.
I know
I
you've
know,
had
but you know.
conversations about religion and science previously, but just from the science and like environmental perspective, I'm a former park ranger with the National Park Service, and population control is a huge interest because if you have too much, like for example, too many deer in this area,
Yeah.
they get a lot of illnesses and they starve and they suffer, and it's not great. Even if you are a meat eating, red-blooded fan of animal byproducts. So if you feel connected to the animal, finding some way to reduce the population without just going out there and shooting them, it does make sense to me, which reminds me, there's an island off the coast of Maryland, Apathy Island, where there are wild horses, and the population control there is, they're basically shot with birth control from a long distance to try to keep them wild, but to keep the population numbers realistic, so they're not just, and it is similar to, they will walk up to your campsite and check out what you're cooking for breakfast.
What's the name of it?
Assateague Island. Same island.
Yeah,
Okay.
I was like, there's Assateague, and there's one more.
Yeah, I have a book.
Yeah.
Does
So-
anybody know why the cows are?
I
sacred?
do.
That's where I was
Yeah,
headed.
So-
circling back, I just wanted to mention. the
No, I
population.
I didn't know anything about cows. So
Get that status.
cows being sacred is, now where did it come from originally? We have theories, but cows being sacred goes back before any like organized religion. So cows being sacred, almost, not almost all, but a lot of the idols of the Hebrew Bible are depicted as cows. There's a number of Egyptian gods and goddesses that are prior to even the Egyptian religions that we have. We see cows being venerated or held higher up as something that is, yeah, so cows are sacred before humans really like got together and talked about why, right? But the reason why is because cows give us milk. Like one of the only sustenances that has been like universal across cultures is milk and cheese and the capacity to do that. There's a connection between the milk from the cow and the mother, or this idea of Mother Earth. There is a connection between fertility and cows and women and bringing forth life that has existed across cultures since like, well, like I'm talking like 7,000 BC. Like even before that, cows have been this source of life. And like I wish women were treated that sacred, but like we got cows instead. And so the cows sort of embody this idea of bringing forth life and nurturing, and like, you know, the land will flow with milk and honey, this idea of milk. And so then you get to like this idea of higher life, or
Where does the cow fit in reincarnation?
so cows are the highest.
Oh, really?
And there, well, it depends on like your flavor of Hinduism. So some would say that like the higher castes, we didn't get into the caste system. I know a lot of people have questions about the caste system and the justification for oppression and destruction, and that's a real thing. I would also challenge you to look at the prosperity gospel before you start judging, because the idea that poor people are poor and deserve to suffer and die is a very Christian idea. So we have to wrestle with our own theology before we start throwing stones. That's where I'm gonna land on that. Every religion can be used to oppress. Great. Use your words carefully. And so cows then, in some sects, it's the higher caste that is like, oh, obviously you had good karma in the last life. There are a lot of Hindus that are like, that's gross. And that's fair. And so then for them, the idea that animal souls are sacred in the same way that human souls are sacred, the cow becomes kind of like your final destination. And that's why they take care of the cows. And if the cow's in traffic, the cow is in traffic. That is an old soul who has earned that position in society, that has earned that reverence, and they're gonna do whatever that or have occupied the space in Hindu culture because like that could be my great grandma and she's like obviously done a good job. So she is chilling and living her best life and we're just gonna let the heifer be. And that's how we got here.
Does that go back to plants also?
Plants are usually like baby souls. What constitutes a new soul? That's a great question. I've never gotten a straight answer on that. But like plants and insects are either really, really, really bad souls that really just needed like a restart button and be like, hold on, let's like baby souls. And I think of like that movie Soul, right?
Who decided all this?
Huh?
How did that all get determined?
How did we figure out anything about human society?
I don't know. I'm saying, it's just like, it's so.
Trial and error, and some people were like, that makes sense.
Do they
And
drink milk in India?
they do drink milk. Cheese
So
is
that's
like,
one of the
dude,
reasons for
if
the
you've
cow.
never had paneer, please go out and get yourself some paneer.
Could you just bring some for next week? No, okay, so whose idea, whose idea was it that I'm gonna breastfeed my baby and then I'm gonna drink cow from milk from a cow? I said it wrong. Like, what?
Survival.
But why didn't they use a goat?
They
I
do,
know
they
they
do.
do use goats.
So it depends on what you had
Huh?
before.
They drink horse milk in Mongolia.
Yeah, I was like, before we started like
Yeah,
shipping animals out all over the world and like raising
Right.
specific breeds in specific places, you had what you had around you.
Yeah.
And so like people do consume goat's milk. People make goat cheese still. Goat cheese is delightful.
they did.
People consume horse milk. People consume, and part of that is these are animals that tend to make more milk than they need for their own young. Whereas like the hippopotamus or the for the one offering they do have, who's gonna try to take milk from a hippo? Not me.
Well, like a
and-
gorilla make.
But they make enough for their offspring.
Oh, okay.
So cows, horses, goats tend to make a surplus of milk, which then humans can use for various things. It also is conveniently easy to store, full of protein, and closer in digestibility to human milk. And so that's where it sort of grew out of necessity. We were like, oh, she makes milk. How's that different from my milk? And then we started to put the it, no one died. That's how we figured out a lot of things
Yeah.
that we kind of cannot
Right.
do.
Sorry. Courtney, you would love to rise up through whatever process, incarnation or whatever, to be a cat,
I want to be a cat
which
so bad.
reminds me when I was younger and I go to Grandpa's farm and milk the cows and squirt milk.
At the
And
cat.
At the cat?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I mean, all these things are just sort of related.
Well, and it's, you know, I think there's very much a piece of like commonality here that we're getting at, that like the universal experiences that feeds us and binds us, and I find that to be in its own right a sacred thing. That like, hey, we also have cows. And like that sounds silly, but it's an experience and a nurturing and a relationship with an animal that then we can relate to.
Traveling in India, alongside the road, the cows are everywhere. The traffic in India is the worst that I've ever seen anywhere in the world. They stop for nothing, but they do stop if there's a cow.
Yep.
Because they don't want to hit the cow and kill it. And we were traveling with a man And I was looking at all the cows and all these, and I said, you know, if I believe it's a cow.
Yeah.
He said, well, they respect the cows and take, but neither do they feed them. You wouldn't want to come back as a cow.
Yeah, maybe not. I still want to be a house cat. Specifically like a young 20-somethings only cat. Like that's that's
No
my life.
kids, just cats.
Just cat. Like I want to be the babe.
Does anyone here know any Indian words like kavita? Does that mean anything to you?
What is it?
Kavita.
somewhere in the back of my brain, but not off the top of
Well,
my
I
head.
had a from India. And one time we were comparing, I'd just been out fishing and I brown up pretty well and sort of reddish brown. And she said, oh no, she would not, because of the caste system, which we have not even mentioned. You mentioned it, that we didn't. And it still prevails to some extent. And she absolutely did not want to be in the sun. Because when she went back home,
So the reason that dark not but like a kind of across the board thing. Pale skin has always been valued because it means you don't have to work hard. If you're working hard and you are a laborer, because we, I don't know, have
You're
always
outside.
undervalued that you're outside. If you're outside and you're browning, it's the same concept as a redneck and the way that has become a derogatory term in the United States. Brown skin or darker sun-tanned skin has been perceived across cultures for all of humanity as you are a laborer or less than. We could unpack that.
And yet really out in the sun.
And yet, pasty white people are like, let me hit.
the reason I mentioned the name, this young lady's name was Kavita. And I had I was talking to a lady, a nurse, when Dan and I were at the clinic. And she was from India and she said, oh, I know that name. That means poetry. And in the language. And so I thought, what a beautiful thought. Parents had a daughter and named her a word that stands for poet. It's not of any particular value, but I thought it was a very nice thought.
I think beauty in of itself has value.
Yes.
So thank you.
I have a totally different question.
Sure.
This non-communication with God and all of this time that they spend in reverence. But I'm trying to question how we can feel that conversation, we can feel touched, we can feel led in this communication. And it sounds like that's not part of what they're even a part of, or
So I think that's exactly your own point, right? It's not what they're seeking. Their expectations are different.
but there's still, even without the expectation, never.
Again, it depends on the flavor of Hinduism. There are veins or threads of Hindu belief that are what I would call on the fast track, where that union or touching, you can achieve, there are some that, and this is more where like the Buddhist influence starts to like intermingle because the Buddhist vein kind of goes this way. But there are those that say you can achieve nirvana without having first achieved moksha. So you don't have to die to achieve nirvana. Now this is like mind blowing and like to others, right? So like it's complicated. There is an idea that you can achieve nirvana and have a meaningful soul connection to the divine the remainder of your life on earth. And then when you die, you will achieve moksha. And so, it kind of depends. It has also occurred that somebody might not be expecting that and then has this revelation or has a connection to God. And then usually there is a level of humility in the East, just like across the board, that does not exist in the West. We are so full of ourselves and egocentric. It's honestly disgusting. And so even if they had it, they would never tell anyone. Because to utter the words that you, a mere mortal, communed with, think of yourself, right? And so like that's where like we have to kind of check our own culture and our own expectations, because sure, I am certain that this religion would not have been around for 9,000 years if it did not have some kind of beautiful spiritual experience for a lot of the people who practice it, right? It's like absolutely, but would they tell anyone? Probably not.
No, but you get the bodhisattvas and
We're gonna get to that. It's Buddhism.
What happens if you commit suicide?
What?
What happens if, well, you get killed, you're a bug and you get killed, or what happens if you commit suicide?
Very different reality. No, you're
You're not
out.
out of the cycle?
You're not out of the cycle.
The only way out is up.
Okay.
Really, or back down and then up. But
Gotcha.
suicide is viewed very differently in the East. Again, carte blanche, kind of like making sweeping generalizations of a very complex and rich culture and history. But like suicide is not viewed by Eastern culture or religion with the same scorn that Western culture has deemed it. And a large part of the reason Western culture is the way it is because after the Protestant Reformation. And so in the East, suicide often occurs as an honor.
Yes.
Or to protect family honor.
Yes.
To allow yourself to be killed or struck down is more of a shame on your family lineage or on your soul than to take your own life with dignity. And so it's seen very differently. The modern sort of concept of suicide as a result of depression is sometimes, or I mean, like other countries allow illness and mental illness included. And so like it's really just America that's like this bad at mental health. And like a little bit Europe.
You're right.
And like there's nuance to that statement as well. Like there are obviously problems and challenges and pressures and issues. Nobody's good at this yet. None of us are good at being people. We're all people and people are gonna people. We're just gonna people differently and we have different shortcomings and things. But I don't think that suicide is viewed even in the same lens. Now if you get murdered, did you do something to deserve that murder? Or was it started to play out? Like, did you betray someone? Did you bring it about yourself? Did you like hell hath no fury like a woman scorned? Like those kinds of things are gonna then, in a more theological way, play out in that. But like, if you get hit by a car by accident, but you have worked to achieve your dharma, I think you're gonna get credit for that. Like, you can't always control those things.
I don't know, but traveling with the Christians in India, they were very happy not to be Hindus. I mean, they really were, and they were trying to get as many to join them, working with the young, to get them, or, they established them. But they saw quite a difference and quite an advantage to being a Christian, even in India.
Well, you get out of the caste system, right? And so again, you have like this politicized religious ideal. And so there is a lot of political history and a lot of empire and a lot of this like complex, like I have to do like a full history of India to kind of get you to fully understand the scope of the caste system and the interrelationship between politics and religion in India. And then you throw in like the conflict with Islam on the southern border and on the there's a lot of these dynamics that play out as religion, cough, cough, Christian nationalism. We do it too. And so like, as a Christian, would we be like, yeah, Christian nationalism, woo, right? Like we struggle with that too, as do a lot of Hindus. Now, there are obviously those who benefit from that system and from that kind of Hindu nationalism, if you will, that has sort of created that dynamic where a lot of people are seeing it as advantageous or as soul freeing to be separate from that. And I think there's probably a fair bit of Holy Spirit moving all the way around this thing that I'm not going to sit here and try to understand.
Hinduism is their relationship with Muslims. And they just feel they can kill them and kill them.
Yeah, but we don't really have a great relationship with
Yeah,
Muslims
that's-
either. I was like,
yeah.
Christians are like probably the worst.
We're not ones to talk about that.
Again, I'm not gonna sit here and talk about a log in somebody else or a splinter in somebody else's eye when it comes to the log in our own eye. Because
I like you.
Christians are like if we again, I love history, so if we're gonna take a zoomed out perspective, who starts every crusade? Oh wait, like I looked at a Muslim. And so like, yeah, there's a long-standing tension between Muslims and Hindus in Southeast Asia. That was what I wrote my thesis on. I know it's are they here? Okay, bye.
One thing I will say, is very much the way we can think about it is like how national sentiment around Islam changed after 9/11.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the actions we saw there. Now, because India borders Pakistan is why you see a lot of that tension now. But also, yes, Hindu nationalism has ascended its government.
Yep.
We see acts of violence against them the same way that like China has violence against the Uyghurs. Before I go, if you would like to read some dialogue, and particularly from a Methodist perspective, I would point you to E. Stanley Jones's Christ in the Indian Road.
Yeah.
E. Stanley Jones was a United Methodist bishop. He was also a missionary to India, was actually a personal friend of Mahatma Gandhi's. And so part of that writing is actually some of the dialogue that he and Gandhi did have. And I think also provides, in an hour, you're only going to get so much, but I think really provides a very fruitful dialogue into looking at the similarities and differences as well. And with that, so long, folks.
Thank you so much.
We're
Wanna try?
He
We'll
can
see.
play with it.
I have a new email address. I'll give that to you because I could send
yeah.
that to my mom.
We'll make sure everybody gets it. So again,
And I'll pay.
my purpose today is not in like picking apart all of the things that are problematic or broken about Hinduism, because I feel like we really have no ground to stand on until we stop justifying all kinds of things. I would also like to point out that it is Christianity that is justifying the slaughter, murder, and destruction of Two-Spirit or queer persons in Africa, India, and Asia.
Yes.
So like back here and take accountability for what we can control before we start trying to dig up, oh, well, that's your sin. Like, that's really not my circus, not my monkeys. And it is Christianity that has been far more violent historically than just about any other religion. And that's just kind of a fact. Like, that's just a fact. Slavery, the destruction of that's been caused by colonialism, the Inquisition. It is Christianity historically that has destroyed this world, not saved it. So in our reviewing and studying and learning of other religions, so people are gonna people, and people have sucked for all of the world. But people have also been amazing and divinely inspired and called to do good in the world. And so as we seek the good in ourselves and as we seek to grow more in alignment with that God that calls us to life, I think we should also offer that same compassion and grace to our brothers and sisters as we walk this walk together. They don't have anything else they want to offer. Huh?
There's a person in this room who told me about Mahatma Gandhi, who, went like iron calloused.
Yeah.
And he had bad breath because he ate like wild garlic, wild onions, all kinds of things. He was skinny. He was not a strong, robust guy. And so in a phrase, as this woman told me, he was a super callous, fragile mystic plagued with volatiles.
Oh my
How
God.
do you
How can you even remember that?
You gotta work backwards. You start with supercalifragilistic.
Yeah.
Well,
have done the most
see, I
amazing
don't have
job.
anything
I came in here with a bit of reticence because I have traveled and I'm a Christian. I grew up as a Christian, but there's a lot out there and you look in a mirror like no one I have ever seen. And I applaud you for that.
Well, we've traveled in parts of Turkey where people were still terrified of Christians.
Oh,
because
yeah.
of Christians.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
dude.
They remembered
Like
the
we've
Crusades.
Yes,
we have
yes.
messed up so much that we
Yes.
have to atone for. And like I have shared in this room in other studies how much I have struggled growing up. Or I go to church, people automatically assume that I am angry, I am
Yes,
judgmental,
yes.
I will condemn them to hell,
Yeah.
and that I am not a good person.
Amen.
There is a very strong cultural wave, especially in my generation and the younger kids, that Christianity is a bad word and it is a bad thing. And so we have to know that with a kind of responsibility and a kind of salience of mind to know that, like, my job is to reflect back God's life into the world and God's light into the world and be a light bearer rather than sit here and try to feel superior, because which again goes back to, right? Like, I think there is a humility that we can learn if we genuinely learn to listen from our brothers and sisters of other faiths, because they have been the minorities, they have been oppressed at our hands. And I think that the idea of like privilege and Christian privilege is something that we need to kind of reckon with as we go through this and as we grow in our own journey of who God is calling us to be. So with that, I will close this out in prayer. There are more donuts and more coffee. Please take it, or we'll just leave it for tomorrow's fellowship hour. But feel free to stick around. I'm not kicking you out. We said an hour and 15, so like not bad. So let us go to God in prayer. Almighty and everlasting, creative and wondrous God, you call us from death to life. You call us from dark to light. You call us to grow and challenge and question. You have given us minds to ponder and hearts to feel. We thank you for this time together, this time of wrestling and questioning and working and exploring. We thank you for the vast diversity. We thank you for the mystery because it calls us to remind us that we have to depend on you. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for being present. Thank you for being felt and known and close. And thank you that we are humbly in your presence. Amen.
Thank you.
You're
Thank you
so
much.
welcome.
Thank you so much.
Don't meet next week.